What?
We're live.
We are live. Okay. Why don't we call the meeting to order then? And we ought to record who's here, but that's a video, right?
Yes, but
So we're
I'll
actually
also,
recorded on the video.
yes, but I'll take notes like I have the last
So-
couple of times.
The door? I'll get it, I got it. I'm the doorman.
Okay.
Oh,
So you all have a copy of the minutes Deb did for us and sent out to everybody. If you want to, you can review them, and if you haven't already. And I would ask for a motion to accept those
moved.
as presented. Second?
Minutes of October 24.
Excuse me?
right.
Correct.
So we need to change number 1, second line to March 12, 2020? Is that right?
Oh, a little bit of a typo there. Yeah, I have 2012 instead of, good for you, Eagle Eye.
Can't help it.
No, that's great.
Well, yeah.
Wayback Machine.
Somebody actually read them.
Yeah. Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know, I read the agenda, and I think on the, someplace on the agenda, I have 12. Deb will provide Article 12
Agendas.
information. Is that correct, Deb?
It should be Section 12. It's Section 12, not Article.
All right.
So Nancy made a correction to the minute, so do we need to,
That was an editorial correction. I don't think we need to go to any motions. So all in favor accepting the minutes with Nancy's changes, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is public comment. You want to say anything? You're the only member of the public here. Mark.
Mark? You're a member of the public?
I'm just a concerned citizen, Mr. Francis.
Well, it's your chance to give input right now.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, so we'll move on to the fourth item on the agenda, potential research and interviews. If you remember at the last meeting, we talked about having Rick and Dave to contact them, dealing with the personnel board when we dealt with that issue. But like, we also talked at former times about visiting some other place and talking to people who operate under perhaps a different charter or charter we consider better. Is there, anybody wants to get into anything like that?
Was it brought up about my idea of Roger Moody, talking to him?
We have brought it up. We haven't invited him yet. I think that's a great idea to invite Roger Moody to come to one of our meetings, having, been a
With any
town manager.
suggestions he has, if he would be willing to put that time in.
Okay, yeah, I'll contact Roger then.
I think that's a good place to start. I mean, as we get into one or two of the other ones, I mean, like the financial procedure section, which is kind of cumbersome, and you already mentioned the personnel, inviting Dave, and
Right.
I think that's a great idea. I don't have any other bright ideas at the moment.
Or if he had the same charter.
With
He was
a few
operating under the
revisions,
same
right.
charter, so, and he was town manager for so long that he most likely had some ideas during his tenure about how things might be improved. It'd be worth hearing what he has to say.
Be a
I think
logical
Steve said
choice.
he was going to contact him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want me to contact Rick? Is that?
Oh, no, Roger, we're still talking about Roger.
Oh,
yeah.
right, that's issue is,
Maybe give him his choice of the next meetings we have scheduled.
I think
Okay.
too, with him working on the county council, where he had
That's
to
right.
work with towns that had other forms of
Right.
government, he's probably got some good insight into what worked well or what didn't work well with those other forms of government.
And he's had some experience involved with committees, so like the Tannery Committee that went
Yeah.
nowhere after he was town manager, so, you know.
Blue Ribbon Committee.
I'll try to get him for next meeting,
Great.
okay, which is when?
26th.
December 12th.
December 12th.
No, actually,
No,
November
26th.
26th, 26th in the
26th.
Tucker Room.
Yeah.
That's right.
We did set that for the 26th?
We did, at our last meeting.
Okay, because I had it blank.
Okay, that brings us, unless there's more discussion on number 4, one time you talked about going visiting people, but I guess that's kind of dead, for at least for at this moment. Now, number 5 is something Deb and I kind of cooked up. And is there a quicker way to get this done? And the thought that she had, or I had, both had, was to divide these things up and divide the sections up with 2 people to a section, and for them to examine it, report on it, do research on it if necessary, and then schedule, bring it back, make that presentation, and as to what they think it should be, and the reasons for it, and then we could move on the issue, and perhaps get it done faster than we're going, because we're going sort of at a snail's pace right now. I would suggest on the, the Personnel Board, that I would work on that. I'm very familiar with it. If one of you wanted to work with me, so there'd be 2 people, not 3, and we could meet with, I thought of meeting with Dave and Rick independently, not having them here. But that doesn't mean we still couldn't have them here for whatever questions you want to ask. But if I could work with somebody wants to work on that section, I would do that. And I don't know if you if the feeling of this group is that's a way to approach that or not, or is there some other way to approach it?
I think what you're suggesting is about the only way to make progress. If you want to have 9 people sitting around commenting on every sentence, we would hear for years. And I think it makes a lot more sense to somehow divvy up these smaller areas of the charter and get them assigned to people, because then at least we're commenting on 2 people's worth of ideas, comments, changes. As long as we can collectively give some good direction to those folks. I think it goes back to this idea of, are we rewriting this whole thing? Are we just trying to correct half a dozen things that don't work very well? What is it we're trying to accomplish? Because I think that's still a little amorphous.
To me, I think it almost depends on part of the charter, part by charter part. I think there are some things we've looked at so far that are more revision than wholesale change and rewrite. We may get into, I haven't spent a lot of time looking at, the financial procedures, but that looks to me, it's got a lot in it and almost too many things glommed together, and maybe that's a more serious project than wastewater department, which might not need anything but some gender neutrality or something. So I think it may depend on the section.
May I make a suggestion on that particular one that both Larry and I have lots of experience in the world of money. And if this idea of a 2-person team to do the work makes perfect sense to me, then I would suggest that the 2 of us, would you have me?
For better or worse.
Yeah, thank you.
And if any of us look at it and have any ideas, shoot them to you?
Yeah, because I assume we've all read through this and made little
Yep.
margin notes on things that we see that we think could be made better or just incorrectly stated. Yeah, and so those, whatever you've got should be sent on to whoever the group is that's working on things.
So what you're saying, that's Article 6?
Right.
And have you both been on the board, select board? You were on the select board.
Yes.
But you were on the planning board.
Planning board, CDAC,
Yeah, so you guys have some.
yeah, comprehensive planning committee, yeah.
So that would be, now the question is how soon can you come up with something, okay? We have, our next meeting is the, what?
26th.
20,
Week after next.
26,
yeah.
Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
Maybe that's,
I think that's a short time for that
Yeah, yeah,
section. That's
yeah.
to me, that's a big chunk. What do you guys think? Do you want to do December meeting?
Or we could work on it and say, this is how far we got. You know, I don't know,
Great.
I don't know that any of these bits will be small enough that somebody can say, yes, in 14 days I'll be completely done.
well, yeah, I know that it's gonna,
Yeah.
and it's gonna depend on how you can meld your time
Yeah,
too, so.
yeah.
And then, would you get suggestions from the finance director and things like that?
Yeah, I would think so, yeah. Yeah.
Now, is there, Nancy and Mark, are there any sections that you think, and that doesn't mean together, that you would be interested in dealing with?
I'm not really sure. I've looked at a couple of things. I know that some of the things that were talked about in the next section down in 7, nominations and elections. There was talk about number of signatures, there were talk about things of that nature. Without going through and looking at it completely, I just read online today that they're talking about buying new voting booths for the town. So I don't know if that has anything to do with this. When I see the bottom one, I just noticed voting machines. Like I said, I haven't studied that section yet.
Can we,
that's what
can we
you're-
volunteer you?
I could, yeah.
I just have a question, I'm sorry, because I wasn't here at the last meeting. So for example, here in the minutes, I got Article 1, powers of the town.
As of what we had
As
talked
of
about through
10/24.
2024.
That isn't written in stone or anything yet,
No, it's just as of 10/24.
just a few ideas.
Right, but, well, we come back to that?
No, I'm just curious, no, it's really a process question. So, as I understand it, Article 1 got reviewed, and then there was probably a vote or a show of hands about approving it in this fashion.
That's all a tentative approval.
Tentatively. Okay, so then, naturally, sorry, but when I read it, I saw things I thought didn't make sense and needed work. So then, all I'm asking is not to do that now, but then how's the process happening to go through things and make those adjustments?
Well, what I would do is, I would do the personnel administration, which is Article 4B, and I'd be ready to bring it back next time. But will anybody work with me? That's the question. Anybody interested in that particular thing?
And then, as part of the process, whether it's you by yourself or with somebody else, you come back with the suggestions.
Right.
Like we came up with revisions to Article 1. And I think Nancy's saying, if there are more revisions, how do we go through it a second time? And how do we make that happen in the process? And so perhaps what we do is if there are other changes, that they get brought forward at the next meeting, or they're brought up at the current meeting and, you know, we vote on them. I mean, I don't know. What do you suggest we do?
Well, I don't have the definitive answer, but it does seem to me, just looking through this, I found some of it unwieldy and not clear. And then I found other things that I thought needed, you know, fixing, that are a little bit more like the date in the minutes. And some of these things can be fixed section by section, but then again, in some ways, once an entire body has been written, somebody needs to look it over and make sure it's all consistent throughout.
Sure. Right.
And also that it reads clearly throughout.
Right?
So, I don't know, I missed the last meeting. If I'd been at the last meeting talking about Article 1, and we would be talking about the content, the actual content of
Right.
Article 1, as opposed to how it was written, and whether it was clear, we probably wouldn't have gotten to these things, these detailed things. So, I don't know, I'm just asking how.
Do you want to
we
make a
might do-
list of those things in Article 1 that you think need to be addressed and send them to us, or do you want to do that now? We haven't quite gotten through what we had started on, and I understand you're trying to clarify the
My suggestion would
process.
be to go through and do the articles as you're proposing, assigned out to people, and have those people come back and work on them. And then at a later date, when they've reached a certain stage,
Right.
so far as their general content, but not exactly how they're written for clarity,
Style.
et cetera, then to go over a group of them, time by time, to try to edit them more finely at that point.
Sure.
Now, you understand Deb is working on, I know you weren't here for this, but Deb has access to the town computer, and she is putting everything on that right into the charter as we go along, the changes
Well,
that we
I
make.
haven't uploaded anything
Yeah.
onto the computer. I am just keeping a proposed changes.
Okay.
It's draft.
Yes.
Draft. And so for process, another thing I would suggest is that the drafts be also labeled, not just dated. Like for number 1.
Put a watermark on
It
there.
would be not just, you know, that as of 10/24, but it would be called draft 1 at the top. And then you could move on, draft 2, draft 3, draft 4. Let's always do rewrites and keep track.
Okay.
And that way also when somebody's looking at it on the website or so, they see how many drafts it's been through, not just, you know,
Okay, I can do that easily.
that's an idea.
Well, why don't we get back to the issue at hand, which is if we're going to proceed in a manner where we're each going to take some part of this, and that doesn't mean you can't take or two places, but I'm willing to try, and wow, there's just a short time, to get as much done on the personnel administration as possible,
Okay.
to put it in front of you at the next meeting. And if there's nobody wants to work with me, don't blame you, okay? I just do it myself. It's not a big problem. The difference of having two people, you got things to bounce off, somebody to bounce off, and it makes it easier and better.
Well, maybe you and Chris could do that. Since he's not here, we'll nominate him to that.
Sounds
So
like
you want us to kind
One
of
problem with Chris is he works.
volunteer?
Yeah.
I
I
volunteer
don't, but
Article 7.
I think, wasn't Mark going to do that or not? Nominations and elections?
That's,
Oh, the two of you?
I spoke about work, possibly looking into that one.
The two, you want to
Oh,
do
did
that
you want to
together?
work on that too? Sure. And I would do wastewater. I'll go interview the people at the wastewater department.
What was that other one?
Why is that actually called out separately from,
Well, there are some other ones that probably ought to be split out because, for instance, that financial procedure one has got a lot in there that probably could be broken out as a different article itself. But wastewater is a different kind of an account, isn't it? And it's a different type of a department. It's different from
the safety
Parks
department?
and Rec and stuff, because it's an enterprise.
We sell services to other organizations.
So I think
which
that's
involve
why it
people,
has
the
its
fire department and the police and
own
stuff.
section.
Because we have to pay for them?
Harbor Committee's the same.
No, I mean, for instance,
It's for them.
Rockport pays us to give us their sewage. I mean, we treat Rockport sewage here,
So I don't know
which is
whether.
unlike a lot of the other departments in town that only takes care of stuff that happens in Camden.
And the enterprise funds were set forward by Roberta because she thought that some of these, and interestingly enough, one of them was the snowball. The harbor and wastewater were both in that, they were both considered enterprise because they could sustain themselves financially, they didn't need money from the town.
I don't know if it also might not be something outlined in the main statutes, and I haven't researched that. Or not whether that's, in main statute, that it's a separate item. I don't know the answer to that. So you're going to take on 5 and 7? You're going to take on 7 with Mark, and you're going to also work on
Well,
wastewater?
no, I'm not so sure about wastewater. I need to think about it.
I'd suggest we start with just like one group apiece,
One section?
one section at a time, trying to work, a couple might be,
Yeah, let's see how it works.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said, I don't see where you guys can be ready next time. I don't think so, but that's just my feeling, but what do you think?
I don't know until we jump into it, but
Yeah, I
that's
know.
probably reasonable
Yeah.
to think that way.
Well, why don't I go ahead and offer to do wastewater rather than skipping ahead? I was going to do general provisions, but I'll take wastewater and I'll talk to, sounds like a really thrilling one, and I'll talk to Audra about talking to people in the department, talking to Steve Aldrich. So I'll take on wastewater.
And what are you doing, Nancy? Which one are you doing? 6?
She's working 7 with
7.
him.
Nominations and
And she-
elections.
With Mark.
Yeah, and Dad took wastewater,
2 pages.
and you guys took
Yeah.
financial, and I took personnel administration.
Now, if we're starting with this and working with this, for example, nominations and elections, which I see is a total of 1.5 pages here.
I think the
How
biggest,
do we know that
the biggest,
everything that needs to be included is included? Maybe we work with
that's
what's here, but
my concern on that one is, the biggest thing in there, I think, is where it refers to a state statute.
Yeah, and just go
And
to
so
the
many
states.
state statutes have changed. So that's going to be a direct question to ask probably Audra.
You can go to the main revised statutes are online and accessible, and you can go to 30-A. Actually, the elections may be a separate article.
Yeah.
But you can find what the state statutes are actually online.
And there's a place there where it shows where the section 30 and 30A.
30-A.
And you could see if the number has changed between the two.
I think I sent that
You sent
PDF
that
out.
out, yeah.
I sent that PDF out.
I took all the PDFs that I've gotten, and I put them in a separate file. I haven't read them all, but I put them all in a separate file so I could keep
the
them.
nominations and elections may, I can't remember if it's in 30A or not, but that's readily available.
Because everything here is returning to section 30.
Yeah, and that is now 30A.
think at this point, I'll try to have something ready next time.
And we can all report back if we're running into
Where
any
we are,
stumbling
yeah.
blocks.
And then, as we finish these things, we'll slide into new ones. And we do have people who aren't here, okay? But we need to deal with getting, and maybe we ought to, if we're done with this, maybe we ought to discuss how to fill Robin's spot.
I'd like to add something else on this. When we rewrote the comp plan, it was a similar kind of thing, where we had, I think we started with 24 chapters, added 3 chapters, and each chapter was basically assigned to different people, sometimes 2 people. They would rewrite it as best they could, sometimes based on interviews with town staff or other people, and they would get their draft to the entire committee several days ahead of the committee meeting, so that the committee had a chance to read it and see what their comments were ahead of time. Because I've been to meetings where people sit there and say, okay, well, let's read chapter 17, and it's not productive. So people could read, so if we normally meet on Thursdays, if we can get the drafts to the whole group by like Monday, give them a chance to read it so that they'll have a chance to read it and think about it and offer some good comments and then we would revise it. And invariably, after you get it all done and you got the stack of all the multiple chapters or sections or whatever, we had to go back and see whether or not there was conflict or support from one chapter to the next on how an activity or a department or whatever was being treated. And then we hired Deb to be the editor to kind of go over the whole thing and to try to make it sound like it was written by one person rather than by 12 different
Right.
people, so that it was a little more user-friendly, more reader-friendly, so people would actually use the document rather than just put it on the shelf.
Okay, so explain to me, I cannot take the charter, put it up on my screen and change anything because it's a protected document, right?
You could make a copy, you could download, you could download it and work on a copy.
Okay, so I can take that and download it into Word, which is, or just take a section of it, download it into Word.
And mess with
Okay,
it.
yeah, then that'll be a
Yeah.
PDF file, which then I can
Then
distribute.
you can
Okay.
add, delete, whatever.
Okay.
And I think we should have an agreement on so that everybody's adding and deleting using the same colors and characters and everything, so it's not changed from one writer to the next.
Okay,
Okay, I mean, typically what we do is if you're deleting something, it's lined through. And usually in red.
yeah, it's,
It was lined through in red.
And
And
addition, so
then additions are brand new in blue. So,
Not red.
not red, because that's too confusing, then we got 2 red things,
okay.
okay? But if it's lined through, because then somebody can look and say, oh, okay, I see they replaced this sentence with this other sentence.
Red would be striking,
Yeah, so you line through in red for deleted,
And blue?
deleted words, sentences, whatever it is you're deleting. And in blue would be,
That's-
new
And
new
do you
stuff.
take out a list and add it to the site
well, once we get to a point,
at each set?
I will keep doing it. Now, I
That's
asked,
a huge amount of work for you.
well, so far I can do it. So far, it's working out. I'll actually have Janice upload. I asked her
she
upload the
does
stuff
too.
I asked her upload on our portion of the town website, the things that you
Okay.
all got, but it hasn't happened yet, so I'll follow up with her on that. And that's a good suggestion, Larry.
I'm not sure this committee should be putting anything up on the website just yet.
Well, we have a section of minutes, and I think anything that we do is public knowledge. It's being recorded, and if we say drafts on it and revision numbers, I think it's public information, and I think it can go in our minutes section on the town, where it says where the Charter Commission is.
Yeah. My concern is if somebody reads something on the website, they might consider it as an official.
Not if it's
Now,
on the
if
Charter
it's-
Commission section
if
and
it's-
it's labeled draft.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
we'll be,
And
I think
then the
we'll be
number.
okay. And if it brings somebody in, wonderful.
Okay, and the next question or the next thought is, there's only certain people that are authorized to get on and put things to that site anyways, so.
Well, I forwarded the information to Janice, and Janice would be the one loading it up. I am not loading anything up on the town
Okay.
website.
I don't actually like the idea of putting stuff on the website. Why don't we just, what's wrong with just communicating between ourselves?
Well, I think once we've given tentative approval to, I don't know, I don't have a problem with something that we've given tentative
I don't
approval
either.
up there being,
Well, that's
saying
not what I'm
draft
talking
and
about.
being on the Charter Commission's page. It's just one more way, if anybody can find it and they see it, I don't see a problem.
Maybe, what if we waited to put something on the website until it was draft 5 or whatever, however many iterations
we
we
could
go
vote on
through,
when it's ready to
and
go
we
up.
say, okay, we're going to bless this,
Okay.
this is good enough to what we think the final version is going to be, that we can go ahead and put it up on the website.
Even
And
if it's still draft.
It'd still be draft, because until we look at all of the work together and make sure that it works complementary and not,
And that would be like a public draft as opposed to a draft in the committee. See what I mean? That's a good idea.
Okay.
Or when two people, or, well, when two people, or one person for that matter, works up one of these sections, sends it out, let's say 2 days before the meeting. At that point, is that a proposal? Does that have anything, any impact on the right to know, the legal things? That's still just
It's just,
communication?
It's still committee work.
it's just work, it's just work progress stuff. It's
Okay, yeah, okay,
We're not making any decisions via
Right.
email.
right.
We're just sharing research and information.
But if somebody wanted to get all the information that we've done already, everything that we've done, minutes and the
Yeah, well,
drafts, they
yeah, it will
could.
be recorded the next meeting anyway. Okay.
should we, just drawing again on what we did with the comp plan, because we were sensitive to the issue you raised, is that, you know, when Jim and I finish this financial thing, we'll have draft number 1. Maybe what we should do is send it to Janice, and then have Janice distribute it.
Right,
Perfect.
that's what I thought. Remember at the
Perfect, that's
beginning?
right.
And that
right.
way, if interested citizens call up and say, hey, I'd like to
You have
see
to.
what you folks are
Perfect.
working on, she can have that list of however many people that would
And
be.
that way, we can all make sure Nancy gets it, because she can
Yeah.
fax it through
I
the
get it
computer.
automatically, so that's another thing I wanted to mention. If anything is sent around to committee members, even if people are sending it by email or walking it to somebody's door, it should still have my name on it, even though I don't use email.
Well, we'll send it to
'Cause
Janice
I'm a
and say
committee,
it's for
I'm a,
distribution.
yeah,
Send it to
Janice gets it,
Janice.
She can
so-
send-
and it
Janice
goes
can
out
send
to
it to
all
you.
the committee members, yeah.
Okay, good.
I'll take another section to look, do a little research on. Anyone else wants to? Article 3?
We're actually talking about Article 3 tonight. That was part of our homework to do for the meeting. 1, 2, and 3, and actually on our agenda was to review the as-of 1024 Article 1 for any additional comments.
Right, which I did.
Okay, we're still, I wanted to move into, how do we get another person?
But you want to do that before we?
Yeah,
okay.
before we get into that, I don't want to make it a long thing, but how are we going to get somebody? Robin has recommended one person, but how are we going to find somebody
Another
who wants to
person to
do
what?
this thing?
You were a minute too late. Robin McIntosh has had to resign because she's taken a full-time job and feels like she's overcommitted.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
And because she was elected, the state statute says that the Charter Commission can vote to replace anybody that's been elected.
Okay.
And so we need to talk about ideas.
And Mark, when you were talking to John today, did he say what time would be more convenient for him?
He-
Since 5:30
he
is
was-
too tough?
He said 5:30 was just way too early for him to get out and get home and get cleaned and that sort of thing.
Why
And-
was
and-
that his behest that we changed it to 5:30? We were meeting at 6:30, 8:30, and then John said 5:30. We all agreed we wanted 5:30.
Right.
But that's, if you want to go back to
Don't know.
6:30, I don't have a problem with that.
I get up at 4, 6:30, forget it. I personally couldn't do it at 6:30.
Would 6 be all right?
Did John say anything to you?
Well, the only other thing he indicated was that he might be asking to drop off.
That's funny, because he was the one who asked for it.
Yes, he was, and he said that to me today when we talked briefly about it, that there were certain things that he wanted to get into, and he said that it seemed to be taking a whole lot more than he realized it was going to be. So,
Would you reach out to John and ask him if we met at 6, would he be able to come, or would he be able to come to our next meeting, even if it were at 6:30, to come and talk to us about his concerns or something? I mean, I think it's important that he come in person if we can get him here.
I know I'm looking at that meeting for the 2 days before Thanksgiving and wondering if I'm going to be able to make it, so.
Well, I was thinking about that meeting also,
Yeah,
that
that-
maybe we're better to go over
Yeah.
into the
December meeting?
meeting, yeah.
And because we all have so much more homework to do than we would have
Yeah,
otherwise?
It's only 12 days from now to the 24th. Is that right?
It's the 26th.
Six,
Yeah, it's
okay.
12 days.
Yeah, so today's the 14th, so it's 12 days to the 26th. And that's pretty short.
It's almost a month to the
Yeah.
12th of December.
Well, we all have a lot of homework to do. That would give everybody more time and get the information out.
Yeah,
Should we have a motion to that effect? To
We want a
drop the-
motion to
drop
say
the
that
meeting of
we
the
will
26th?
not have,
We should just do it.
that we cancel the meeting on November 26th. Somebody say so moved?
And we should add to that that the next scheduled meeting is December 12.
Yes.
So I would second your motion.
okay, yeah,
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
I,
Okay, so I'm gonna,
yeah, that,
Or, not to beat this too much further, but 2 weeks from December 12th is the day after Christmas.
I know. That's why we have
Which is
our,
gonna
we,
be-
we talked about having it on January the 9th, the last meeting. We
Okay.
did the 14th,
So we're-
26th.
So we know we're only going to have one meeting in December then.
So far.
All right.
That means we all have to really do our homework.
well, at the December 12th meeting, we could decide to have another one, but that would be up to us at that point, and I think that's highly unlikely.
Yeah.
And I'll let Dave Morrison know that we won't need the Tucker room on the 26th. So Robin, so we need to make some suggestions on a replacement for Robin?
I
Can
don't
they
think we
open?
should carry on a long search. If that woman wants to come on, I think we ought to take her.
But who is she? What-
Karen
Karen,
Doremus Tranfield was just somebody that
Does
Robin
anybody-
has worked for. I have
Does
met
anybody
her.
know who she is?
She's been on she was on one of the downtown committees. She's been on the budget committee.
They can't
That was
just
just
put
a-
out a call for people to volunteer who might want to be
We
part of
could,
it?
we could do that, but I thought we could also, if you have ideas of somebody.
I
We
would,
could-
I would think that it would be advisable for the town to officially
Advertise.
make the advertisement, whatever that official thing is.
Okay?
you know,
That's what I think.
And do whatever that is, and then knowing that whoever it is does have to come on through even though if we as a committee vote for that person, I think the selectmen still have to approve it, don't they?
no.
They're not in statute.
No.
Why not do the other
By the law,
committees do
if you
that?
take a look at the law, it's in section 2.
All right.
It says reappoint. My thing is let's not overcomplicated. If you want to overcomplicate it
Okay.
and do it that way, it says vacancies occurring on the commission shall be filled by vote of the commission from voters of the municipality. So, except that a vacancy among appointed members, like John, if John is to drop off, then the select board has to do it. But we have no requirement in here to do a search or to do, just to find a volunteer. I think that's going to be hard.
Well, I actually, I think it'd be good to have Janice put the word out, the normal channel, to be honest with you. I know there were some other people who were interested in joining this. I think Karen Grove was interested in joining the commission, but the select board at the time didn't want to appoint too many people that had been former select board members. But it's been a long time since Karen has been on, so
It can be announced at the next select board meeting, which is next Tuesday, and it can be put on the website. So it's kind of an open with a deadline. Then we want to have the deadline. If anyone interested should submit their name and why they're interested by a certain deadline date, just
Yeah,
like
fill out
they do
the-
for.
And
other
we wouldn't be able to
committees.
do it until our next meeting anyways, which is
Yeah.
almost a month away.
so they would fill out a committee interest form
Yeah,
that
exactly,
exists.
because it would be
Yeah.
nice, if we don't know them personally, it would be nice to find out
It's
what
a fair
their
way.
background is, what their
And they
experience
do
has
it
been in
by,
the town.
and they get their name in by the next meeting, which is a month from now anyway.
So I would say by December 12th, so it can be assembled and set out. Okay. I will, I'm going to go by see Janice tomorrow, so, or I'll email her.
Yeah, maybe tell the people that they have to have their,
Interest form in by 12/10.
yeah, a couple days before, so that we could have a chance to look at it before we have the meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, that brings us to number 6, and Deb gave us Article 1, Section 4D, E, F, G, and H, and we've all finished them and we've discussed it. I just wanted to get a vote on it, so we sort of agreed by consensus to the changes in the structure. So if you want to discuss that some more, we can.
Nancy has some ideas on Article 1. So
Yeah.
other than
Yeah,
style,
Other than
there's some-
style, I
yeah.
do.
Okay,
So you want me to mention them then?
right.
Okay,
Do we wanna
so
move
the
forward?
town meetings, I thought the town meetings paragraph A was kind of, could use a rewrite. I'll just say that. I didn't write out how I thought it should go, but it, in my opinion, could be more clear. Then B, again, it's just edits. After the town office, comma, it should say the, inserted, Camden Public Library. And then it should say and on, insert the word on the town website.
Where are you, Nancy? What?
And then C, what?
She is on Section 4, Town Meetings, number B, letter B.
And then C?
Doesn't exist.
Yeah, it is, it does in the revision that you were sent out, that you didn't,
The yellow.
All right,
no, not, the yellow is for,
it's on my computer at home. I didn't print it out.
the yellow we said we're going to discuss when it comes to financial procedures.
One, so,
Oh, you meant
for
C?
C?
Oh, C, I thought you said the yellow.
No, I said for C.
Okay.
D became C on the new one.
I think the C that I had, that's here, again, I think there's a way that has more clarity that could be written. That's what I say now. I didn't sit down and work it over, but I would. Then we get D and E, read that, then F.
At least 60 days prior to a regularly scheduled town meeting, right?
Right.
That's the
The
paragraph.
legislative body may vote to change the provision of appointment of the finance director, tax collector, and town clerk as given to the election of these officers in accordance with, and my comment of F is, huh? Like, what? Is anybody, any ordinary person reading that going to have any idea of what it really means or says? I don't think so.
It's not a great written paragraph.
Some of them are cumbersome, which is actually one of the
Could be
reasons.
better written. And then G, for G, it should say the offices instead of office of the three people. And I believe the way that it should be stated is, instead of the way G is written, it should say residency in the town of Camden is not a requirement for the offices of, and then list those people.
That's great.
Basically,
Or the
just flip it.
For the offices of, it should say
Residents of-
duly appointed individuals to the offices of. So it should say residency in the town of Camden is not required and blah, blah, blah.
Would you do me a favor, since you had been willing a few minutes ago to take on another
Yeah.
article? Would you work on?
I'll
what do you
work on the wording
On the
and get
clarification
something.
of section 4A
Yeah.
and 4C and G, and if you,
An F. F, I thought, oh
Yeah.
my God, what's F
And
about?
an F, town meeting should be capitalized.
so if you want to do that, and if you want to send them to me, then I can
I'll do that.
type this, and we can get it out to everybody before the next meeting.
Right. Okay, so I'll just do what I would call a rewrite of Article 1 and then get it to you, and you can see what you think,
And then I will get Janice to send it out to everybody before the next meeting.
because what I've tried to do on anything that's written is, would the ordinary person picking this up be able to make head or tail what's being said?
That's one of the things I've liked about looking at the Herman charter, even though they are a town council in many respects, it's written very clearly as opposed to some others that are even more cumbersome legalese sounding than ours. So that's great, Nancy, thanks. So I'll look forward to getting that.
And there was a section in here that was from Herman, right?
Well, there was some suggested wording that
Right.
I was suggesting, and I think it's,
Okay.
once we get to Article 2.
Right. Okay.
So that we're sort of, 6A is going to be dealt with next week. With Nancy's rewrite.
Yes.
So that moves us to 6B, Article 2, Section 8, Secretary. And Deborah's given us some information on that, I think, here.
Section 6.
It's Article.
It's on your computer.
All right, everything. Sorry.
It's the Article 2, Section 8 regarding secretary. That was one of the things on Audra's list in our last meeting. And we talked about whether we needed that position of secretary. They're supposed to, the select board elect them. And so I volunteered to do a little homework. And I looked at the Maine revised statutes and found that the only officers that were really mentioned, I mean, there was no secretary mentioned at all in the Maine statutes as being any kind of a requirement for the select board to have. And we also had talked about, there was duplication, we thought about, the secretary was supposed to be keeping a journal, but if we eliminated the secretary, who would keep the journal? But it already really is outlined in Section 12 of that article. And if you look at Section 12, which is the procedures, it actually says, rules recorded, keeping in journal, the board shall determine its own rules of business, blah, blah, blah. And then it says, "The board shall provide for the keeping of an accurate, permanent recording of its meetings, for maintaining a journal of its proceedings, and such recordings and journal to be public record." So my thought was that because procedures in 12 already charges the select board with being responsible for having a permanent record, that you don't need that section in about the secretary being the one responsible for it, because 12B in procedures says that the select board's responsible for doing it. So that was my rationale, that it would be okay to eliminate the position of secretary, because 12 procedure already requires it. And one of the other things the secretary was required to do would be to give notice of regular and special meetings. But I thought that would move very easily into the procedure section. And what I did, in what I sent you in the email, was I rewrote section 12 and I split it up into paragraphs. One that said A was meetings, one, the board shall, and I added notice of all special and regular meetings shall be given to the public, right before the sentence that says all meetings shall be open to the public. So all I did was take the secretary's responsibility to make sure that the meeting notices were given to the public, and added it to the procedure section that talks about meetings. But the select board is responsible for making sure that notice is given to the public about all meetings.
Is there a time frame in that?
There isn't in our current charter.
Does it need to be in there?
That's an interesting question. Should there be? I know for public hearings, there is. But these are not public hearings, but,
Okay.
I mean, that's something we can certainly entertain.
I would think that that should be a separate numbered item.
Notice of all special and regular meetings?
Oh, yeah. Because meetings, then what we have, we should have what, number one should be titled regular meetings, probably. And then there'd be a number two that will have a title special meetings.
Oh, no, what we do is we have one, under meetings is the organizational meeting, two are regular meetings, and then three, which I
Special
have
meeting.
actually as executive session. Two, executive session would become the third type of meeting.
I'd make it, I'd have regular meetings, and then, don't we have to notice special meetings
Well,
in a
that kind of-
different way?
Not according to the current charter, but if you
The
think there
same.
should be. The current charter simply says, shall give notice of regular and special meetings to its members and to the public.
If we start doing that, will it be necessary for us to define a special meeting and define a regular meeting? So that somebody doesn't come in and say, oh, this is, because you usually meet on Tuesdays and this is Wednesday, this is now a special meeting, or something like that. I mean,
Okay.
Do we need to define that?
That just happened.
Yeah, that did. It
Just
comes
like
up.
a couple weeks ago, when they had the meeting on Tuesday night, and then they, I think, reconvened Wednesday afternoon, or Wednesday morning at like 11 o'clock in the morning, because
Oh, so that,
one of the guys couldn't, one of them couldn't be there.
well, if you continue a meeting, then
Yeah.
it's not a new meeting, it's just a continuation of the previously announced meeting.
It's in the
So if they set
public note.
a meeting, this is for strictly selectmen now,
Yeah.
select board, whatever we call them, if they decide to have a meeting the following day, does this eliminate them from being able to do that by requiring public notice?
No, and as he said,
same
if
meeting.
if it's the continuation of the same meeting, the agenda continues.
Okay.
With the, if they had
If
to
it's a
adjourn
new
and
agenda
reconvene.
item,
Then you'd have to notice it. I mean, that's why you would use the continuation mechanism, is to say we ran out of time, somebody got sick, whatever it was.
Okay.
There was some reason we couldn't finish the work on the day we thought we would, therefore we're going to have to wrap it up tomorrow.
You're not adjourning.
makes
But
sense.
so you're not adjourning.
They're not adjourning the meeting.
You're not adjourning the meeting. And like you said, you're not adding things to the agenda.
But then it seems like, isn't there some distinction that I've heard made, Mark, between a special meeting and a special public meeting and a
Yeah.
public hearing and a
Well,
public.
well, they do that like,
Is
like
is
when
different.
we finished the personnel policies. They had a meeting, it was actually a public hearing and a vote on those policies. And it preceded their regular meeting. And I think they do that occasionally on more than one time. That's how they handled our policies, our personnel policies.
So
Were you
we,
on that at that time?
No, what?
Were you on the board at that time when they did that?
I think there's, the state statutes govern public hearings.
right, and these aren't public hearings we're talking about. Okay, I would be.
But that's covered, isn't it?
What, public hearings is in
Yeah.
another section. We're not talking about public hearings. We're talking about select board meetings. I would be willing to take a look at what some of the other towns do regarding notice of meetings. What language we have meets this main statute requirement, but if there's some concern about whether we're giving the right kind of notice, I would be happy to take another look at it.
To Nancy's point or comment, the selectmen's meeting, when they have an additional meeting, such as their regularly scheduled, first and third or second and
Right.
fourth of the month, and then they get to the point where they need an extra meeting between to do something, they're scheduling actually one of their meetings. It's not necessarily a town meeting. This is just selectmen's meeting. It has
Right,
nothing to
this-
do with a special town meeting.
Correct. This is just select
Okay,
board.
it's totally, it's just
Okay.
that.
Right.
Just the select board section.
But there's only one town meeting anyway.
No, that you can have
Unless
a
they
special
call a
town
special
meeting.
There's a special town meeting.
Right, and I just want to make sure that we're not, that's not confusing a selectmen's meeting with a special town meeting.
This is just
That-
purely select
It's
board.
just, this section is just selectmen.
Would you like me to check how other towns handle notice of meetings, or are we happy with the language we have?
I guess I'm a little confused as to what the issue is. If the select board sets a schedule and says we meet the first and third, whatever, of every month, those are regularly scheduled meetings and they go on without any surprises. If an item comes up that requires their attention, or they might just not have enough time in the regularly scheduled meetings, they may choose to schedule an additional meeting. Is that a special meeting? If it's become,
If it's off the regular schedule?
yeah.
Well, they have done special meetings, like they did a special meeting when there was the heated issue of the snowball. They held a special meeting about it. And they had the conservation, and the trees and the erosion, and they had Conservation Commission there, and Land and Fake there. Also, they called a special meeting back at the time that I wanted to get those items on the citizen initiatives on the ballot, and they'd said no, they wouldn't. And so we had an attorney involved, and they called a special meeting and said they wanted to have the attorney come and make a presentation, and at that, they were persuaded they better put them on the ballot, but they called that a special meeting.
And they had a open meeting for the public. It wasn't necessarily a select board meeting.
They're open
about-
meetings.
An open meeting about when the dam report came in, the Magonacook River dams came in, and they had a public meeting. It wasn't a public hearing, but it was a public informational meeting.
Special
That's
meetings,
not
yeah.
necessarily a special select board meeting. That was just a public meeting. And there's a difference between the select board saying, hey, I think we ought to have a public information meeting on painting the fire station. I mean, that's different than an official select board meeting with an agenda, in my mind.
And sometimes they call them select board workshops.
And
And
that's
they
within
name
the-
it that, and
They
then
do
they say
that.
who they want to be there and what they're going to talk
But
about.
at
I
those
think-
meetings, they do not have any votes on special, on workshop meetings.
They're just discussions.
They're to get information. They may invite people in, you know, to give them advice.
I think we're overthinking.
I think we are too.
What if we just said that all meetings of the select board need to be noticed?
That could be in, under A in meetings, notice of meeting can be at section and say,
Because this is really separate from what we're talking
I-
about. What's a
I agree. I think
special
we're-
meeting, what's an extra meeting, what's a regular meeting?
Yeah.
I think we just, I think it's
Just say
good.
all meetings and have to be noticed in the places where we give notice.
And I think if we just make it as its own separate line or paragraph, it'll be called out and easier to see. It wouldn't be as buried in the charter, which is why I split that whole section 12 procedures up into 2 sections, but we can have it in 3 sections: meetings, notice of meetings, and then executive, or notice of meetings, meetings and executive session, because that's one huge paragraph in this charter, and I think that things get buried if they're not broken up.
I
So-
know when they're going to have something that they have to vote on, they always make sure it's in a regular agenda, and the agenda is published whatever the X number of days ahead of time it is.
And that's one of one of the select board's operating rules, which is what the charter gives them permission to set their procedures and rules, as opposed to that being a charter item. The charter item is the select board's responsible for setting their rules and procedures.
Okay.
So I'll split that up into 3 sections. So anyway, that basically was my concern, my thought about the secretary, and I took paragraph B and also just sort of split that up because it too was, too big a paragraph, people don't read them.
So you split it into items 1 and 2.
Yes,
That's
rules,
it.
recording, keeping in journal, I split into
Right.
1 and 2 items to break that up.
Then when I read it, I would also split up voting, which is C,
Okay?
into 1 and 2. And I would flip how they have it in that paragraph. 1 would be 3 members of the select board. The other thing I do is always say select board, not board, but always say
Right,
select board.
we determined that last time, I just haven't made all of those changes.
Shall constitute a quorum, no action of the board shall be binding or valid unless adopted by affirmative vote of 3/5 of select board members. And then next would be voting, except on procedural motions, shall be by roll call.
It's weird. I think you brought this up,
We've
Lowry.
never had a roll call vote that I'm aware of.
But then they either say the quorum is 3 out of 5, and then they say adopted by affirmative vote of 3/5 of board members.
3/5 is 3 of that 5 members.
3/5 of,
5 is.
yes, but that needs to be called out. It's 3/5, i.e. 3 is what it means.
Yeah,
So why don't we just say affirmative vote of 3 of the board
You can also
members?
say majority. 3 out of 5 is the majority.
Right, exactly. That would
So
be
why don't we
better
just say
way.
vote of 3 of the board members?
they have to have 3 for a quorum,
But this.
and
this
nothing can
goes against
pass unless it has
Robert's
3 affirmative votes.
Not
rules.
saying-
Robert's rules, if your quorum is 3 and the vote's 2-1, then it carries.
Right, but we're not using Robert's rules.
Well, generally, that's
No.
that's
But
how the
that's not
meetings
what
are
this-
run.
But
There's
that's
the
not what this
municipal
charter-
rules that they use,
So
and I don't know what it is.
that's what I was thinking at the time, but is that 3/5, Larry?
No, not unless you got somebody splitting your vote. But
Yes, it
that's
is.
standard, kind of standard operating procedure.
That's how it would
Is
work
if you go by
here.
Robert's rules, there's only 3 people here, 2 who vote in favor, it gets passed.
Exactly.
That's why
No, I
it's
think
set.
when
The
it's
3/5 thing,
ties,
what's
isn't
that for? That's no good. That
It
3/5.
says 3.
Well, but
So that-
So why
think
can't it
it's,
just say 3?
what I'm saying is that it's the general assumption is we're doing everything by Robert's rules.
I don't think so.
It can't say three, it
Because
needs
for
to
instance,
say
we don't
by
go
a
into the charter and talk
majority.
about the process you go through to make a motion and to do seconds and to revise it and all that other kind of stuff, because it's a given that we're following Robert's rules.
But this is what the charter says, is that it has to be an affirmative vote of 3/5. It's not saying we're going by Robert's rules.
Well-
The charter is saying this is.
I would agree with Nancy, 3/5 is pretty doggone confusing if you got 4 people.
And in
I'd say just
practice-
leave that out. Leave the 3/5 out.
If you decide, I think we need to decide how decisions get made.
Or how they make
Does
decisions.
it require 3 affirmative votes of members of the select board?
That's what I would go
If
by.
only 3 there, is it approved if 2 of them say yay and 1 says nay or abstains?
Remember?
don't know.
I don't ever remember being a 3-member.
No, I don't remember a situation like that, but it's a great question.
And the planning board did that from time to time. We'd only have 3 people there, and there were votes that were 2-1, and that would carry. Because
I
it's
certainly remember when a tie does not.
tie does not, but I'm not talking about
Okay,
ties
so
never carry.
why don't I review the main statute and see what it says and let
And also
everybody
ask
know?
Bob and John French. John French was select board chair for years. What did he do? I'm sure it came up.
But
I'd like to see it just
We know
be
that- we know that
3,
He would remember
period.
too.
I agree.
Great mind.
3.
Anything, any select board decision must have 3 affirmative votes, period. If there's only 3 people there, then it has to be unanimous of those 3.
By the
If
way,
there's-
that's how the budget committee operates.
Yeah.
You have to, regardless,
Okay.
like there were 20 people on it, okay? But in order for something to pass, even if, I forget really what, even though you didn't,
17.
you were missing, let's say, 6 people. So in accordance with the way you're telling it, that would have 12 people left, 7 votes would carry it. But the way the Budget Committee operated was you needed to have the 11 votes of those 12 people.
I'd like you all to note that it doesn't say by affirmative vote of 3/5 of the board members present. It says board members, which to me means 3/5 of the board, which is 3 people.
Yeah.
That's
It's a-
very good, but the fact that all of us who are fairly intelligent people are arguing about what it means then we need to have more clarity
Say
about
just-
the way
I
it's
will-
written.
I will double check the Maine state statute to say what the Maine state statute tells us.
I would just drop
Okay.
the 3/5 wording, and just make that for our purposes, regardless of what state statute says, I would like to say, for our purposes, it has to be 3.
Yeah, that's nothing wrong with that. You could-
And we've already said that our select board has to have 5 people,
Yes.
right?
But you run into times when there's vacancies, as we've recently experienced.
Yes,
There's
you
only
do.
4 members.
All
Yeah,
right, all
I
right,
was
enough.
still-
Woo-hoo. I suggest we're beating a dead bear. I will check the Maine state statute to say what it requires us to do and let everybody know.
Yeah.
And
When-
I'll give
when
you
you're
an
checking
idea
that,
of
can
the
we
sequence I do for that.
get rid
I'd
of
like
the
your
roll call
sequence.
vote? Because we've never had a roll call vote.
Yeah, I don't remember a roll.
I don't think there's ever
call.
been a roll call vote.
no,
There are, I mean, like the U.S. Congress does a roll call vote.
there are times, yes.
Unless
You
it's-
only have 5 people, you know how people voted.
Well, yeah, but then somebody's got to
Unless it's-
stand up and say, you know, Mr. French, Mr. whatever, Mrs. whatever, you know, and then
Yeah.
it seems unnecessary to have a roll call vote.
And you get, yeah, right. And in Congress, you get them passing a bill with 7 people standing in the chamber, and it's aye, it goes through. So there's a reason for it at that level.
I'll let everybody know what the Maine state statute requires. So that was all about secretary. Keeping record in the journal. So that was really all I tackled ahead of time on Article 2 for everybody. We haven't talked about all of Article 2, but this was just about whether we could eliminate secretary as a superfluous because it was already covered in procedures, and we've never elected one that anybody can remember. I don't remember having a secretary when I was on the planning board. I mean, not on the planning board, but the select board. Jim, do you remember electing a secretary among members?
Janice was here, reported that,
We have somebody here, but
but was not someone who voted
It wasn't a select board member that was elected.
No, it's not.
So you're going to eliminate section
It's a
A.
town employee
My suggestion is to
or a
eliminate
paid
section
person
8.
to come in and take minutes.
And if we go through all of Article 2, I could redraft this with any other comments we have tonight on Article 2 and send that all out as a whole thing, so you're not
Okay.
looking at pieces.
How about in section 4, where they say elect a secretary?
That would be deleted. Section
That's what I
4B
would
would be
think, yeah.
deleted. Do we want to start, though, at the top of Article 2?
Good place to start.
I remember when we first talked about eligibility, we wanted to know what that meant. And the state statute, 30A 2526, defines for state purposes, a resident is 18 years or older and a U.S. citizen. That's what is considered a qualified voter by the state,
They just have to be 18 years old?
18 years or older and a U.S. citizen.
Is that, can that be a note in the charter?
Or it could be under eligibility, you could say that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
It could be in parens, only qualified voters of the town, parens.
And then
a
say,
resident
well, why
18
not
years
say
old
that after that a sentence, a qualified voter
is.
yeah.
Yeah, it's Title 21A.
So we're going to say that
We
a
could-
qualified voter is considered a resident. Is that what we're saying?
18 years old and a resident.
Well, you got to be 18. to be
Citizen of the
a
United
voter.
States.
Well, you have to be a resident, 18 years and older, and a U.S. citizen.
But not,
That's a
but not a
qualified
voter,
voter. That's called a qualified voter.
even if you haven't registered to vote.
It only says 18 years older and a U.S. citizen.
You don't have to be a
Qualified
registered voter
You just have to be
to
qualified.
run for office. That's what,
Yeah, okay.
That's what you're leading it to-
Just trying
leading to.
understand,
That's
yeah.
what qualified means, just qualified, it doesn't say registered voter. You're allowed to say they have to be 21. I mean, some other towns have 21 as the minimum age for a select board member. I don't have any feeling about that one way or another.
and there's some towns that don't have an age limit because they've elected
You have to be at least
13-year-olds and
Because the
So we'll make
18
that two
It says
sentences.
select board members shall reside in the town during their term of office. Okay, so that's residents. You have to be a resident. Now, you could perhaps eliminate that last sentence and within the definition of a qualified voter, put a resident of the town.
We got into that last 2 meetings ago. Oh, my God.
I didn't quite hear what you said, but I think it should stay there. Select board members shall reside in the town during their term of office.
Yeah, or throughout. I would say instead
So
of
they
during.
also should be a
Throughout.
resident. Okay, it's the same
during their
thing.
term of office.
it doesn't say they can't have a summer home in Rockport or
Right,
Florida.
but they're legal residents.
Their
Okay.
legal residence would be,
And then such members, please.
Where are you?
Select board members, it should
Shall
say.
reside.
Yeah, not such. Select board members shall.
It does say that.
Word such.
just
Section 3, election.
Section
Oh, you're on
3.
section 3, I'm sorry.
such members shall, I'd say,
Yeah.
just remove the word such, members shall be elected to serve.
Select board
Members shall
members shall be elected to serve.
Okey-doke.
That makes sense.
I think that, I have two things to raise on this. So we say select board members shall be elected to serve staggered 3-year terms. At each regular municipal election, board members shall be elected to fill those positions that have become vacant. Should we say due to expired terms? Because we want to talk about how to fill vacancies later. To me, is that confusing? Because that could also mean just a select board position that's become vacant due to death or moving.
It's also new members. I mean,
Well,
new.
No.
Is there another section
He
where,
wouldn't be a new member if he was being reelected.
would it, is there a section someplace else that mentions replacing someone who resigns or
Yes.
leaves for other? So I'd say leave it as it is.
Okay, and not say due to expired terms?
Don't just say it becomes vacant. It may be,
Because we do have
Well,
a,
when
we
the
do
term
have a,
expires, it does become vacant.
right.
okay, so it's not necessary to say that.
Same, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, I
Back
just,
to such members, which you guys wanted to change to select board members. Well, such members is referring back to the qualified voters. You're saying here, select board members shall be elected. When they are elected, they become select board members. So it doesn't make sense to me to lead that with select board members. Now, maybe it makes sense to you, but it doesn't to me. And such members was going back to section 2. Relied, it's a qualified voter. You could say qualified voter. A qualified voter shall be elected to serve staggered 3-year terms.
Actually, I think just going back to the word such, I think that's why it was there to begin with.
can't you just say members shall be elected
Yeah,
to serve?
those
Yeah, why don't we,
members.
can't we just say members?
Again, you're saying a member, you're already a member.
Okay.
Okay, that's not changing anything.
I still think we're
The
still.
term of office shall be for 3 years.
Excuse me? The town what?
Yeah, that's another way to say it. You say, the term of office shall be for 3 years, and terms shall be staggered, 3-year terms. I mean, there's so
Yeah,
many
we-
ways
they-
to say
they-
something.
Okay,
I get-
I understand what you're saying, yeah.
The
Yeah.
term of office shall be staggered
3-year
3-year
terms.
terms.
Yeah.
That's great, Nancy. Okey doke.
Term of office shall be.
I would, don't say the term of office shall be a term. Do you think you would say
3
year
years.
period or 3 years?
The term
Well,
of
let's look
office
at
shall
the
be
language
3
when-
years.
when
Shall be
it's done,
staggered 3 years, eliminate the other
Yeah.
term. Okay. What do you guys think, we don't have anything in here about term limits?
Yeah, I was thinking that with the word terms in there, then you can address term limits.
We don't have term limits
We
in the
don't.
select board, do we?
No.
There's term
Sometimes,
limits on the budget committee, which is really kind of bizarre, but
because
that's,
you want the institutional memory.
Nobody ever enforces it.
well,
No,
but
it's not. Well,
if that's the case, then we shouldn't have that.
Yeah.
As part of the charter.
One town I looked at has, you can have 3 consecutive terms, then you need to take a year off before you run again.
Right.
I think term limits, I mean, this is not personal at all. I love the fact that John was willing to do it all those doggone years, and you do want institutional memory, and it's important, which is why I think something like 3 years on the select board is good, because you need that.
He's not the only one
Continuity.
who's served that long, though, either. Other people have, I think.
Certainly before my time, but I'm not old enough to remember. So I would like to introduce the idea of whether we want to have term limits.
Well, you know, the thought is ringing in my head that I like term limits for Congress, I like it for legislators and governors. When you get down to a small town like we are, is that really necessary? Is it better to just let it stand? And if somebody like John gets elected again and again,
If he's willing, if
Yeah,
somebody's
I-
willing to do
yeah.
it that many times.
Well, I'll give you an example. Blue Hill, where I lived for many years, had just 3 people on the board, and the same people pretty much were reelected. I still get the weekly packet, and I haven't lived down there since 1991, and I lived there about 15 years, and the same people stayed on. So I think kind of what can happen is, they of course know how to run the town, but the rest of the story is they run the town, if you see what I mean. So it is something to think about in a small town. And also what can happen is, because they've been reelected over the years and they know what to do and everybody's used to it, and also in a town that size, by being on the board, more power accumulates in the individual, that then maybe other people who might consider running are more discouraged.
Or other people get lazy because this person knows everything and you just rely on
And the
them.
person doesn't really want to give up the job.
But you know,
They like
our
it.
checks, the town manager, our charter is really a charter of checks and balances. The select board has, according to charter so far as I can tell, is not allowed to have direct contact.
With employees.
They go through the town manager. So
Right.
and I'm just playing sort of devil's advocate
that's
on it.
fine.
There is a checks and balance that allows, that doesn't permit a select board to run the town like you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a non-town manager town.
I didn't see John French running the town.
No.
Now, a question on that. Are they compensated in Blue Hill?
Hardly.
Because I know in the town of Liberty, their 3 selectmen are compensated. First, second, and third selectmen receive a different stipend each year.
Yeah, they get a
And
little bit.
here, we have no stipend.
That's not true. We do.
We do have something,
Yeah.
The
yeah.
select board all paid,
Okay.
I did,
Oh, like 18,
2,000.
2,000? Oh, it's
okay,
2,000.
all right. I wasn't even aware of that amount, in all honesty.
It's a token.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's-
Yeah, I
Help
might
pay,
consider
help
it.
pay for your gas and stuff. Oh, I just throw it out there. There are other towns that do have term limits, and I just thought it was worth
Which towns
discussing.
have term
I think,
limits?
well, Herman, for one, has town limits. Herman, they're one of the ones that has the 3 years and a year off.
I have no objection to term limits at something like that, three terms.
I think one of the things that has happened in Camden, I think, is that we seem to go through, we've got this group of people that are leaders in the town for X period of time, and all of a sudden, they all get old, or whatever, and just stop. And all of a sudden, it's like, there's this gap. It's like the 60-year-olders are moving on, and there's not a lot of 50-year-olds, and then and I think that when you have term limits, you're requiring new people to get involved, to get engaged. And you get the benefit of having new ideas, fresher ideas in many ways, which I think can be helpful to any organization. And if somebody's a veteran and they do it for 9 years, and they want to come back and do it again, just take a year off and come on back and do it again. There's no lifetime limit, but I think that it does encourage new ideas. It encourages other younger people or equally aged people to get engaged in the government that were engaged before, and I think that that's a plus.
I think so too.
Well, what do you want to do? Does people want to investigate what other towns do? I mean, I mentioned Herman's. I just find Herman's charter easy.
Why don't we just take a vote on the issue and let the majority?
Kind of to see how we feel as a group
Yeah.
who are
Whether
here
to
tonight.
explore term limits as opposed to setting what they
No,
are.
let's, I would say that if I was sitting out there, I would make a motion to establish a term limit of 3 consecutive years.
Well, I think it's
Consecutive
too
terms.
early, and
Terms.
it's worth it to have a,
I'll second the motion so we can vote on it.
You'll make the motion. I'm a chair.
Okay,
I can't
I'll make the motion that we propose to put in 3 consecutive terms
Since 9 years.
as a limit,
And a year off before running.
and a minimum of a year off before running again.
and I'd just like to add to that, if I can, to the motion that we get the sense of the people who aren't here tonight, who are also on the commission, and how they feel about it, what they think about it.
Yep.
also, in addition to our.
Well, since
what
it's
we-
been second, we're discussing it, that's one of the reasons I might vote against making that decision tonight. I
Right.
think we ought to just throw it out as,
I think it
to
should
be
be a sense of our
considered.
group, and then we get a sense of the rest of the people, rather than making it a definite decision tonight. That's what I would vote.
but it's been moved and seconded
Seconded.
as is,
I
right?
didn't second it.
Oh,
There's no second.
All right, withdraw the motion.
Oh, it just dies. Motion dies.
Withdraw the motion.
yeah.
A straw poll of those that are here.
We can only vote with the people that attend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, if next time we meet, two other people are missing, do we postpone the vote again? And
Okay.
again, and again? At some point, you gotta say the people that are here. You know,
I'd like to, I'd
We go
like to,
backwards.
I would like to-
Today we went backwards.
I'd like to ask for a straw poll, a straw poll of those that are here who think we should have term limits of 3
And
consecutive.
we're still, just to remind everybody, we agreed that these are all going to be draft issues.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And at some
You're gonna
period
come
in the
back
future,
and
we're gonna come back and say, okay, here's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is there anything we want to change now that we've had a chance to ruminate on it?
Yep.
So there's still this is not in stone.
Okay.
All right.
So now we have a second.
No,
Well,
it's
just
for
a
a
straw
straw,
Okay,
for a straw poll.
Straw poll, I think, I brought it up, I think term limits is a good idea, so I go along with
I agree.
three, and 1 off.
I agree. I really shouldn't have a vote, but I, if you want term limits,
chairman
fine.
has a vote.
I'm not gonna agonize over
Chairman
it.
has a vote.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll add that in, because I'll be
Do you
retyping
think
this up.
it might be a good idea, Jim?
It might be, but I'm not
Not sure.
sure.
Or maybe the 3 and 3 isn't the right number, or it's not a good idea at all, but let's put it in and then see how it
I'm just not sure.
sits.
It's sort of like the general consensus of people tonight was worth.
So it was really sort of 4-1 on the
It was-
straw poll.
Remember, the public hasn't voted on this yet.
It's still,
Right,
it's
and-
a mixed consensus. It's a mixed, there is no consensus.
Right.
It's just a
Just to
thought.
get, people interested in the charter.
That's for darn sure.
I think
Well,
it's
we-
unnecessary, but I don't think it hurts anything.
Right, and we certainly, we haven't heard from the select board yet, and I understand that input to the commission is on their next agenda.
Yes.
Whether they, I wish we could tell them what, something like this is what we should get their input on.
Well, I think there's similar kind of topics that they're considering.
Well, have we as a committee been officially invited to that select board's meeting, or are they just going to talk about it and decide what they want to send to us?
I just saw a one-line, whatever it was on the agenda, input to charter commission.
I saw that too.
That's all I saw.
I think it's Audra going to tell the selectmen what she spoke to us about, I think.
Well,
Or
one
it's-
of the things that happened is I had talked to Bob a few months ago and said that I knew that, I ran into the grocery store. I said, I knew that the select board had been talking about things they found in the charter that they wished were different. It was cumbersome, awkward, whatever. It was, there were things that they saw that could be improvements. And I said, if we're going to be having the responsibility of reworking the commission, it sure would be nice to know these things that the select board has discovered that are awkward or cumbersome or whatever. Can you tell us that? And he said, yeah, we'll put together a list. So I think that's what it is. Because there's times that procedurally they're going along and they would like to accomplish event A and find it difficult because there's something in the charter that might create the difficulty.
And since this article really relates to them, we could go through and sort of finish what
Yeah.
we think we have comments on. This really might be one that we might want to offer to them to say, this is our first run-through on the section that impacts you.
I
and
wouldn't get into it. I think it's good, just like with Audra, to have, when she talked about what she saw were important, we did ask Bob Falciani the night he came, if
So
the
they'll come
select
to us.
board would provide us with that. So without muddying it up with them hearing what we sort of think and draft,
Good idea.
just get their ideas.
All right.
Okay, and you're gonna have us a rewrite of what we've done
Yep.
so far. Okay, we're organizational meeting.
We've tentatively eliminated B.
Yeah. and or the members of the newly constituted select board.
Since this is the section on the select board, do we need to put select board in there every time? Since this is the select board section, it's not like a section that's talking about other things, or do you want to just be super consistent?
Or else
I would say it's always
encompassing, you say,
important with something like the charter to be super consistent.
Well, you say the select board shall consist of 5 members and shall be referred to as the board throughout this document.
You can, but it's not the whole document because there are other boards as well.
But those
See
boards are
what I
being
mean?
referred to as, there's only 2 other boards.
Well,
We can refer to
I
them
just
as.
used to write reports for corporations and you would
I'll
never
just
not
keep
leave
it
it out.
simple, I'll just put it in.
Yeah. The reason being that this has the effect of a legal document.
Right.
That's the difference.
Good point. The only one on that I really I had a question on was F, which is elect one or more members
too.
of the board to act as authorized representatives of the board to sign warrants for expenditure of funds. I just wonder if that's best practices. Shouldn't it be 2 or more? I mean, at least 2 people ought to go in there on,
It's 2 or more.
it should be. I mean,
I would-
I know
I
that
would
that's what we did
think-
when I was on the board.
The chairman and the vice chairman would automatically have that authority, but it's not here. But I'd say to make it that way, elect 2 or more.
But are they even elected? I thought when the town sent out a payment to a vendor or whatever, that it had to be approved by 2 select board members.
2 people have to sign off on the warrant in there, and I remember going in and.
But they're not elected, it's just 2 members of the select
But
board.
where it needs to say that 2 members
But if
need to do
But
it.
if this isn't the way we do it,
Oh, I
Who
know.
signs warrants now?
Wait a minute, when are the select board
All select board members. do.
signing
no, they
anything?
don't sign, they authorize the payments, they don't sign checks.
Right.
But they authorize the payments.
Yeah, when the checks
The warrants have the
when the
authorization.
checks are cut over there in the finance department,
Right?
they come over to the other side of the office, and in my day, it was put in a bin, and before the checks went out, at least 2 of us went in, reviewed the list and looked at the checks, and then had to sign off, and 2 people had to sign off in order for that.
On every check?
No, on the list.
On the
It's-
list.
There's
On
a,
the list?
it's a list.
The list is the warrant. The warrant means the list.
Right.
Okay,
So-
all right.
So I think it ought to be codified, unless it's, I mean,
It should be.
I don't know whether we need to elect, but at
Is
least
it
2
state law? Is it in a state statute somewhere?
Not if it just says elect 1,
And
unless it says somebody has to be elected to sign off.
Well, that
And
never happened. We never elected anyone. We all knew that the warrant had to be signed.
Right.
It was just
And
the
signed it.
the chairman.
But not everybody
Some
does.
people didn't come into the town office to sign it, but that's not, I mean.
But did you all end up signing them, or did just one person?
Oh, no, it was multiple people.
But you weren't elected
We
to
were not
it.
elected to do it. It's just
My
a-
recollection
a
was at least 2 of
responsibility.
us had to sign off on it, and
That's true.
many times when I was on it, there were only 2 of us that went down and
So they're
reviewed it and
really,
signed
the
it.
select board is not electing. They're not doing this election.
look like they're doing
They're
it.
just whoever's conveniently could go on down there, and it could be 1 or more people.
I always thought it was 2 of us had to.
It is two. It
2
has to be
makes
people.
good sense.
Could this line,
It does, I'm not arguing that, I'm
This
just
should not be
saying, what the
in the
hell are they
organizational
doing?
meeting
Yeah.
section. This should be in the section where it says, here's the various responsibilities of the select
Finances.
board, and this is one of those responsibilities.
should that
I have
line
a
be
question about
eliminated?
this. For nonprofit boards, the board of the nonprofit, their first primary responsibility that they have, or everything else, is financial.
Fiduciary responsibility.
That's
it's called.
exactly right. And they are responsible, there's something personally responsible, which is why they have board insurance for boards that want to be careful, because you're personally liable. And so
Well, remember,
what I'm going to ask is, what responsibility does the select board member have? Is that called out anywhere in a similar fashion? Because you're approving warrants for money. And kind of, it's almost flying blind because you get a long list of things to sign and you can't investigate all of it, which is partly what happened with the snowball because everybody couldn't keep track of everything. It never will happen. So,
Most of it's pro forma, you just do it.
yeah.
I mean, when you signed off, did you ever do it? You signed off on
All
it?
the time, all the time.
So did you look at things, or?
Well, I did, sure you do, you sort of do
You
a
try
cursory
to,
look.
but
You
you
try
can
to,
only do-
But, you know, it's everything from the payroll,
Yeah.
that's a warrant.
Yeah.
And any expenditures
Takes
that
a half
we
an
pay
hour
for
at the most. You
vendors,
sit
for
down.
anything, all of them
Right, and go over it.
Anita and I looked at every check.
But it was a,
You
And
can't,
and we looked at the
Group of checks,
invoice,
and then there
because
was-
you do it
there was-
weekly.
no, you can't ask
list
questions
of what
about
they
it
were
or
and what they
anything
were
by the
for.
time it gets to you.
That's-
You're kind of a stamp of approval.
Yeah, but you can look at the invoice.
Does anybody else in the organization sign off on that, other than select board people?
Well, I think the finance director
finance
has.
director does and the town manager does.
Who has the
And-
legal
and whatever
responsibility
department it
for it?
comes
I don't
from.
know, I don't know the
You know,
answer to
if-
that question, Nancy.
If Randy has an expense for the police
has to
department,
approve it.
he's obviously got to approve that that is a legitimate expense, and I approve the payment of that much. And
And the
then it
town
goes on
manager-
up the chain.
And the town manager's responsible for making sure you're staying within the budget, so it falls on the town manager. But it is important to have something in the charter about
Yeah.
select board members signing off, and whether it's in the organizational meeting or it goes in another section. It doesn't show up in financial procedures, as far as I've been able to tell.
But that would be a more logical place, especially if nobody's elected. It's just 2 of the 5 select board
It's
members.
one of our responsibilities.
It's
We
one of
just
your
all do it.
responsibilities to do that work.
Should that be added to section 12 procedures?
Or put in the finance section, but we haven't gotten there yet.
If it,
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, this task needs to be done to verify that the payments are
Right.
correct.
And what I
But
think,
nobody's elected, so it needs to be withdrawn from,
if this
from
task
section 4.
was put in the financial section, wherever it would fit.
yeah,
Where it would say, a minimum of 2 selectmen must sign off on whatever that document is called.
whatever it says.
And rather
Sign
than say
warrants
they
first.
have to elect the 2, to just say
Warrants and
2
enforcement.
selectmen must sign
Yeah.
every,
Warrants for expenditure of
warrants.
funds.
That leads to,
So add that to financial.
that leads 2 out of the
section.
5 to do it. They can decide,
take F out of here.
Yeah,
It's funny, it's not a majority.
yeah,
It's two.
that's true.
that,
Well, but you've got
that's because,
all these other people that are verifying it along the
No, I know.
way.
How
It's
often
a
is the
comment
warrant?
on
Once a
majority.
month or once a week?
no, that comes out, it's weekly, isn't it?
Yeah,
Every week.
that makes sense.
Payroll warrant.
Financial report comes,
Payroll
So
one
that's
week
going to
and
go
then
into your
regular
The
section.
finance
checks.
section
Yeah.
somewhere.
Okay, so F is
Now,
added.
then, if the town manager makes those decisions, is the town manager legally responsible? Is that where
Where's
the,
finance director? I think we'll get to that in the,
yeah, that will be under financial.
or town manager too.
And that comes under where, one of the things that I was told at the beginning was the fact that this requires bonding, but we're already insuring, so the word bonding doesn't fit with what we're doing with May Municipal or whoever our insurance
Right.
agent
that's what I
is.
wondered, is.
So
the
that was
select
one of
board-
the things that got me into this to begin
That's
with.
what Audra talked about
So,
at our
right.
last meeting.
but
There is a
select
place
board
for that, and we
members-
haven't gotten
They're
to it.
totally separate.
They're covered by the insurance as well.
Insurance, the town's
We're
insurance.
coming to that in another section.
And
That's not
select-
That will be
so
coming.
That was another question, so that's how come select board members who can look over warrants don't need to be bonded,
It's covered in another section.
right?
Okay.
And then you're also covered by certain non-liability clauses because you're an elected representative. And you're acting on behalf in a good faith of people of the town.
We hope. Right.
Right. Okay.
And then go to appointments, and this is that 3/5 vote. And what, it probably should be changed to at least 3 members, select board members vote, at least the vote of 3 select board members. How does that sound? Don't know.
Which are you on?
We're on for 5, first sentence.
Appointments?
Yeah.
Page 6.
Oh, that sentence is just awful.
I know.
Is there some place where we could put in here, one spot that covered all, that all decisions of the select board must have a minimum of 3 affirmative votes? And that way it would cover it in all the sections, rather than having to bring it up. Is that a possibility?
Is there any activities that require a supermajority?
Well, that would be section 1 under voting, right? Where we had the select board before.
Yeah,
Well, one thing about having it in each section is you don't have to go back to find it. Okay? You know, like if you put it in the glossary, that all votes have to be by 3 people on the select board.
Yeah, that's
For
in
any
12
issue to
procedures.
pass, any and all issues to pass, you have to have 3 votes. Now you read this thing, and it's not there, you gotta go back to the glossary and look, if that's where you think of looking. And that is just one comment I would make, that,
Yeah, you know, I just wonder if they didn't decide to use 3/5 vote, so they were trying to use fewer words rather than saying at least 3 members of the select board. I mean, I wonder, because that's 3/5 vote is used a number of times in here.
Right.
well, I think somebody thought that was clear.
By saying,
That's 3 out of 5, okay, that's
okay.
what 3/5 is, 3
by
out of 5.
saying
isn't it?
3/5, if there's only 4
At least-
people
yeah.
there, you can't have a 3/5 vote unless you have 3 votes.
No,
If you
they-
have
right,
3
the
there,
first sentence says,
you know,
the select board shall consist of 5 members, okay?
there's,
And 3 votes, 3 people, if you only have 4 there, or 3.
Well, if you have-
then
if-
to
if
have
you
the
have
3/5,
3,
it still have to be.
if you only had 3 people there, 2 people would be 66%, which is more than 3/5. 3/4.
No, but it's of the.
Yeah,
of
so-
the 5.
That's what I think it means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why not just say it?
Yeah,
I mentioned this earlier, is there a problem with majority as a word?
Yeah,
Don't we
because the
understand?
majority, if it's, there are 3
There
people
were
there,
3
it's
people,
2.
majority
People
be
for
2.
quorum, so a 2-to-1 vote
Yeah.
would be
A majority of
legitimate vote.
those present, as opposed to a majority of the board. Majority of the board would be 3, but it could be, it could be
If there were 4
interpreted.
people there, majority would be
3.
3. If there were 3 people there, majority would be 2.
Yes.
So it's really a majority.
Yeah.
But do we want, but 3/5 is implying it's 3 out of 5. That nothing can be passed without it being 3 out of 5, not 3 out of 4
Well,
or 2 out of 1.
we just had that discussion a minute ago.
We're going round and round and round.
Is there any place that establishes a quorum here? What is a quorum? And we all accept that a quorum is a majority of possible members of the board.
One more than 50%.
Well, we
Okay?
do say that.
But,
We do.
and we accept Robert's rules for that.
We-
But
no.
there's nowhere they set forth that.
Yes, at the very end of procedures, which is section 12 in this article, we say currently, 3 members of the board shall constitute a quorum. No action of the board shall be binding or valid unless adopted by affirmative vote of 3/5 of the board members. It's the very last part of section 12 procedures in this article. We talked about that when we were talking about eliminating secretary. I actually think that should be way up front, not one of the very last things in section 12 on procedure, but we could move that up. But we currently say, and, Nancy pointed out the sentences could be reversed, voting, except on procedural motions, voting shall be by roll call, and we said we don't do that. but start with 3 members of the board shall constitute a quorum. No action of the board shall be binding or valid unless adopted by affirmative vote of 3/5 of the board member. Maybe that ought to go right up front, so it's really clear.
And I
That's
would-
in section 12A.
If we could make it even clearer and get rid of the 3/5.
That's section
And
12.
just say 3 affirmative votes
C.
of the board members.
Steve, C.
Any issue must have 3
I mean,
affirmative
Think
votes.
of all the time we spent tonight talking about, well, what happens if only 4 people attend?
Doesn't make any difference, 3 out of 5 or 3 out of 4 is
Well,
3 members.
Let's just say 3 affirmative votes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that's easy to understand. And then you don't have to worry if there's only 3 people showed up, then all of
But,
them have to be affirmative to pass it.
So that sentence would say, no action of the board shall be binding or valid unless adopted by 3 affirmative votes of the board members.
Sounds good to
And then
me.
wherever we've got the 3/5 language, we put the 3 affirmative votes in.
Yeah.
And then that's easily understood.
So back on appointments, said select board shall, the select board shall by ballot and at least 3 affirmative votes,
Yep.
not later than the 3rd regular meeting.
Can we eliminate by ballot?
The sentence, it's like crazy.
The select board shall,
By 3 affirmative votes.
by at least 3, by
Not
3
later than the
affirmative
3rd
votes.
regular meeting and afterwards.
Well, you started with not later than the
Review
3rd
appointment
regular
order.
meeting, the board shall, instead of this old legalese or whatever it
And
is.
then later on, it says not exceed 3 years, said office of town manager being hereby created. It's ridiculous, the whole thing. The sentence
It's-
needs to be,
it's
paragraph has to
stilted.
be completely rewritten.
Yep.
I'm too tired to think it out tonight. I know.
Do you wanna-
This is
do
my
you wanna-
time where I fold.
I know. Do you want to take, you were doing some of the paragraphs in
Yeah, I'll
Article
do
1?
this one.
Why don't you do that one as well?
5A.
Yeah, take on 2.5A, Nancy,
On
because
the-
it's cumbersome.
Yeah, cumbersome sitting to one side. The only 2 officials it mentions here are the town manager and the health officer.
Or health officer.
Yeah. Which
Oh,
is-
you know,
which
the
is-
person wears the white uniform and sits.
the Health officer is usually the code officer. Not always, but frequently is the code officer. But is that it, or are there other officers that the select board appoints?
Who's, somebody gets appointed the health officer.
Well, it's frequently the code
It's been the
officer.
code officer.
That's typically the code
But
officer.
then in B, it says all other, and then get this, necessary town officers and boards. All other, so like, has
Isn't,
anybody ever bothered to define necessary
constable
town
considered a
officers and boards?
town officer?
See what I'm
I don't
saying?
know, I mean, I think you want the language to be somewhat open, so 5 years from now, there's a need to appoint a new person to manage a new activity in town. You
Like
don't
the
have to.
sustainability
Yeah,
position.
you don't
of
have, you don't have to rewrite the charter.
Yeah, I think
Is,
that's flexibility,
On, with Jody as finance officer,
director.
finance director, but she has, in order to sit in for the town manager, when the town manager is on vacation,
They need to be appointed.
she is appointed as a town officer.
But so is the chief of police, right?
Chief of police, fire chief,
When
sometimes.
she was on.
So you're going to take 5A and B and make them less cumbersome?
Yeah, but I just, sure.
Just a little bit of question and input about this. They talk in here about the office of town manager being hereby created. Is that, what's that all about?
Yeah.
There's a separate section here that talks about the town manager. Is this each year they're or every, after each election, are they recreating the town manager?
I know it. That's what's so
I mean,
preposterous.
all I'm saying, I look at that and say, why is that there?
That's
Doesn't need to be
ridiculous.
there.
What?
It doesn't need to be there.
No.
What
I
said
think that
officer?
could be, what I guess I'm saying to you is that could be
Created.
struck.
Yeah, hereby created doesn't need to be there.
The other thing is B, 5B, okay. So the select board, the Conservation Commission resigned en masse back in September or something. And I know that within 30 days, the select board didn't appoint a brand-new conservation commission. And the conservation commission has called out somewhere in an official document that we have to have the commission, the planning board,
That's main statute.
those are the two main, and the assessors, right. So,
That's in main
we
statute.
aren't even following what's here. I don't know.
Well, part of the difficulty, it says shall be appointed by the select board within 30 days. Question would be 30 days of what? Right? I mean,
Yeah, that's a very good
After said
point.
organizational
That's like the
meeting.
planning board, if they're, I guess, it's like all the committees. I mean, committees are appointed, you guys, you did it, well, I did it, you appoint committee members within the first month of, that's when
as
most
best
terms
you
expire.
can,
Yeah,
But
yes.
then sometimes we don't always have enough people, so people get
Right.
appointed or people resign partway through. So you
That's
gotta
an
have to-
ongoing thing.
Yeah.
But this part sort of sets when everybody's term on a committee, other than budget committee, expires, is in June. And by the end of July, people are supposed to be either reappointed or new members are this sort of sets the expiration for committees and boards. So that's what's important about this, even though it seems strange, that sets the expiration for people's terms.
I understand why it's there. Then it should say, shall be appointed by the select board by August 1st, or something. Something we all understand what it is, instead of within
Right.
30 days.
She'll come up with something good and concrete.
Someday.
Yeah.
How about it, how about you
Lovely,
leave,
am I missing something?
okay, how about you leave out the time frame completely? Just say, all officers of boards shall be provided strictly and shall be appointed by the select board, period. Just leave that out within
Well,
30 days.
Because
Because
you have to give,
it
you
will-
have to give a date, otherwise it's not really
No, it-
enforceable, and if people have grievances, they can come to the,
Because it's ongoing. Like we've been saying, people get
Sure.
reelected in June, they get reappointed in June, they drop off, they get reappointed in January, and June, and February.
But you
So
want
it's
to
an ongoing thing.
It is, but you want to establish a time when regular memberships
Ma-
actually do expire.
That should be a total separate thing. It shouldn't be there, because if in the general running of the town, all committees run from town meeting to town meeting, or June 1st to June 1st, or whatever.
Well,
So basically,
So you're saying that would be a section on town committees?
if there is a section here that says how town committees are appointed,
it says it right there. That's
Yeah.
how they're
they are appointed, but it's an ongoing thing. It's not always going to take a place
right.
within 30 days. All of the, unless it's a new committee, it's already established in the town, and there's no reason to say it has to be within 30 days of anything.
Where does this 30 days come from? The language in here that I read, at the third regular meeting after said organizational meeting. So they have an organizational meeting, which is set forth in section 4.
We're down in section 5,
5B,
5B,
appointments.
appointments.
Well,
Where
I
it says
think-
now or hereafter,
Right, which means in case they create a committee on November the 15th. I think you could say, shall be appointed by the select board within 30 days
I-
of the annual town meeting or as vacancies occur.
I just say leave the
I think
word,
that'd be fine. You
I
just
think
need
if
to
you say,
give us some
or
reference
as
point.
vacancies occur.
Yeah.
And
Would
that,
it be the organizational meeting?
is-
We're 30 days after the organizational meeting.
okay.
We should also be all other necessary town officers, boards, committees, and commissions, because we have a variety of groups
Exactly.
that work on stuff.
just say as vacancies occur. Leave out any
Officers, boards.
number of days.
No, because you
gotta
need
give
to
them a number of
establish
days.
when they've got to do it to start with, to set expiration times for you on the Parks and Rec Department. Your term expires at the end of June.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
Right.
don't make that, somewhat obvious. That's what this does.
I don't think it does it here. I think it does it someplace else where it establishes the committees. Well, that's where it should do it.
That
I
should
don't
be in
think-
each committee's directive.
Right, it shouldn't be here.
Committees, well, I don't think it hurts to be here. So you're going to work on 5, right?
Can I ask a question of section 4? What is section 4D? Select board may appoint the town manager to act as their agent as overseers? What?
Yeah, overseers, and we can go to the glossary to see what overseers are.
Act as their agent as
Overseers
overseers?
of the poor.
What's-
That's what the select
Could be
board is.
singular.
Supervisors, public officers whose duties involve general superintendents of the town inhabitants with monies furnished to them by public authority.
But the newly constituted board is the re-elected board, right?
Yeah,
Each year.
yeah.
So they get together and they reappoint the town manager every year, is that
No,
right?
no, this says to act as their agent as overseers. You're looking at D. But they do reappoint the town attorney, police chief, and fire
The
chief.
reason
Every year.
overseers is plural.
Every year they reappoint them,
Select board are the overseers.
okay. And what about the town manager? What does it say may?
We're looking at 4D.
This is May,
May appoint the town manager, act as their agent as overseers.
first word.
May or may not? They may or may not?
No, just may.
They may choose to do it,
If
and
they
they
don't,
don't.
May
don't
just
have to.
means the may or may
Maybe
not.
that's implied.
Not-
In other words, the town manager can be the overseer if they
Appoint her to be.
cede to her an appointment. If they decide to keep being the overseers, whatever that is, themselves, that's up to them.
But if we don't know what it is, how come we have
What?
it in here?
Well, because we have
I
a
think it's in the
definition in the
glossary.
glossary of what an overseer is.
Tells you what it is.
Well, I'm just saying, I forgot.
That's why overseer is asterisk.
I
I
think
believe.
it's overseers of the poor, though.
That's,
somewhere.
that's the official.
No, it isn't, but it is somewhere
That
else.
was the politically correct term.
Yeah. And we changed that.
Okey doke. We're going to obviously see another draft of this. It's 7:28.
Yeah.
I would be happy to take whatever Nancy comes up with on 5 and include it. And anybody has, what do you think about,
Well,
we've already talked about reworking 12 procedures. We haven't talked about the filling of vacancies, which is something we need to discuss because we're not doing that adequately. This is vacancies on the select board. So if Nancy gives me rewording on section 5, I can recirculate that with draft 1 of Article 2, and then we can finish that up next meeting.
Well, I think too, we brought up the idea of term limits. and
Correct.
Whether we're, think about whether or not we think that's a good idea. I think something that goes together with term limits is whether or not there's any ability to recall.
Yeah, that would be.
Because a couple of the examples we got from the other towns, and I don't recall which towns they were, gave an ability to recall a select person.
Yep.
And if what we're supposed to do is think about these various ideas, that's not, and we may decide that that's really dumb and we don't want to pursue it, but I think we should at least have a conversation about it.
So that would be some homework for next time, is to look at how we fill vacancies on the select board and recall procedures. And I know I keep bringing up Herman, but the way they word things in Herman is very easy to understand, as opposed to some of this cumbersome language. They have recall procedures, I believe. We have a link to that, that's.
how many people live in Herman?
I don't know, they have a town council form of government, though.
Right.
And we know that there's a southern Maine town that has a recall procedure, because they went through that last year.
Rockland?
I can say school district is about the same size.
Yeah.
Council governments usually have recall
Yeah, they do.
provisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to select board.
But anyway, I think that's worth people considering between now and next time.
Okay, we have 3 minutes and we're out of here. And I'm gonna make up an agenda and send it to her. I'm not gonna try to go over it with you because there's so many different parts.
Okay.
But, there's certain people have responsibilities. We aren't meeting until the 12th. Deb and I will work out an agenda between the two of us. And we'll get that out to you. And what stuff comes in, we'll deal with, like she has some things that we're rewriting.
She's going to send me some stuff on Article 1 she was going to reword.
Yeah.
So do you want, I could type up some 1, 2, 3 kind of notes for all of us. Would that be helpful to send out with the agenda?
Yes.
Yep. Nancy, before you go,
All right, I'm
the
gonna
section
ask for
7 that
a
we were going to
motion
work
to
on together,
adjourn.
So moved.
the section 7 that we're going
Favor?
to work on together.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Give
The ayes have it. Thank you.
Steve, in your role as the
We can
grand
set a
poobah.
time to get
we got
together.
attorneys here.
Okay?
In your role.
And we can meet here or someplace and sit where we can look and talk on a face-to-face
Right.
basis, okay?
What I thought too was we could each look,
Yeah. Yeah.
separately,
Yeah.
our concerns, and then meet.
But if you call me in the next day or two, we can actually set a time
I didn't know
to put
that.
it
Yeah.
in front of me, because I've got other stuff going on that if I don't, I'll lose track of it.